Welcome, everybody, to the launch of the IPPNW Global Classroom, a 10-month-long virtual education program designed to educate, empower, and uplift a strong cohort of disarmament activists. My name is Molly McGinty. I'm the program director with the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, IPPNW, the winner of the 1985 Nobel Peace Prize. With IPPNW, I have the privilege of coordinating our federation's education and campaign work to expose the humanitarian impacts of nuclear weapons and the tools that we have to rid the world of these disastrous bodies. At the outset of today's discussion, I want to extend my sincere thanks to Soka Gakkai International, SGI, for their generous support of the Global Classroom. They've made this work possible, so thank you so much. I see Chie here and I think a few other SGI colleagues, so thank you very much. I also want to thank Anduin DeVos for supporting our tech today. Thank you, Anduin. And with that, a few housekeeping items here. Please, throughout the duration of the conversation, remain muted. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat or wait until the end when we'll have time for discussion. Again, feel free to have your cameras on or off as you please. And throughout the session today and the next 10 months, we're going to work on a basis of respect for one another. We're going to recognize that we're coming in this space to learn together and that there are different foundational knowledge that we each have, levels of knowledge that we each have, and ways that we engage in this work, both because of our past experiences and where we're calling in from. And if you want a sense of who's calling in, please look at the chat. I think we have like 5 continents covered just this morning. So through the year ahead, we'll learn alongside one another on one of the most pressing crises of the moment. Today's meeting serves as an opportunity to ground ourselves in the goals, structure, and overarching question of why such a program is worthwhile at this time. So whether it's the morning, like it is for me, afternoon, evening, or the middle of the night, thank you again for being here to take action against nuclear weapons. So we're going to dive right into the program this morning. And sorry, I'm getting over a cold here. We're going to start with introductory remarks from Ambassador Mabhongo of South Africa, followed by Susie Snyder of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, and then some pre-recorded remarks from Dr. Ruth Mitchell of IPPNW. They're going to share a bit about the importance of disarmament education, the tools that we have to create a nuclear weapons-free world, and the importance of, and I say this in big quotes, everyday people taking action. Following their remarks, I'm going to give a 5 to 10 minute overview of the classroom structure and goals, and then we'll have time for questions. We'll close with a save the date for our first official classroom module. So with that being said, I pass the floor to Ambassador Mabhongo, who is the Deputy Director General of Global Governance and Continental Agenda at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation based in Pretoria, South Africa. Ambassador Mabhongo.
Thank you very much. Once more, apologies for my camera. But greetings to you, Molly, and other organizers, as well as the participants in this very important session. It is indeed an honor for me to address this inaugural session of this series of seminars focusing on the humanitarian and environmental impacts of nuclear weapons and the tools we have to pull ourselves back from the brink of nuclear war. It cannot be overemphasized that the need for disarmament and non-proliferation education and critical thinking skills, particularly among young people, has never been greater, especially in view of the heightening geopolitical tensions and the growing possibility of the use of nuclear weapons. Education on disarmament and non-proliferation raises awareness and has the potential to further foster efforts towards sustainable international peace and security. With regard to nuclear weapons, we must first and foremost recall that the very first resolution of the United Nations called for the elimination of national armaments of atomic weapons. Yet, 80 years after the nuclear weapons were first tested and used, these horrific weapons continue to pose an existential threat to humanity. Nuclear weapons are cruel and indiscriminate. They wreak havoc and cause massive, unacceptable loss of life. It must be emphasized that national boundaries are blurred when it comes to the fallout from any nuclear weapon use. It is extremely doubtful that nuclear weapons could ever be used in an armed conflict in accordance with the principles and rules of international law, particularly international humanitarian law. The understanding and awareness of the catastrophic impact of a nuclear weapon detonation and the continued risks of such a detonation, whether by accident, miscalculation, or design, have contributed to ensuring that humanitarian considerations can no longer be ignored. This is particularly relevant in a debate on disarmament and non-proliferation of nuclear weapons that has for far too long been dominated by the national security interests and concerns of a small number of states to the detriment of humanity as a whole. These humanitarian consequences are substantiated by new scientific evidence. This growing body of research confirms that the effects of a nuclear weapon detonation are more severe, cascading, long-lasting, and complex than previously understood, involving short and long-term damage to the environment, socio-economic and sustainable development, the global economy, food security, and the health of current and future generations, including the disproportionate impact that nuclear weapons have on women and girls, including as a result of ionizing radiation, as well as on infants and children, given their particular vulnerability to the effects of nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are a threat to the security and ultimately their existence of all states, irrespective of whether they possess nuclear weapons, subscribe to nuclear deterrence, or firmly oppose it. The inherent risks and transboundary and global consequences of nuclear weapons use make clear that all state security is jeopardized by these weapons, and that all states, therefore, have an urgent security interest in their total elimination. It must be reiterated that the wider economic, developmental, and environmental consequences of a nuclear weapon detonation would affect developing states much worse given the lack of adequate responses to such a catastrophe. The catastrophic humanitarian consequences and the risks associated with nuclear weapons underpin the moral and ethical imperatives for nuclear disarmament and the urgency of achieving and maintaining a nuclear weapon-free world, which, amongst other drivers, inspired the creation of the TPNW. As the only country in the world to have developed and then voluntarily destroyed these nuclear weapons, democratic South Africa has been at the forefront of nuclear disarmament efforts for decades, working towards a world free of nuclear weapons in the hope of avoiding the catastrophic fallout from a nuclear conflagration. Given South Africa's role and standing within the TPNW and the broader nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation architecture, South Africa was elected as the president of the first review conference of the parties to the TPNW to be held in November and December 2026. The TPNW is a landmark treaty, being the first international instrument to comprehensively prohibit nuclear weapons, and is therefore widely regarded as one of the most significant developments in the area of nuclear disarmament. It must be reiterated that the establishment of a legally binding regime on the prohibition of nuclear weapons found in the TPNW is a necessary and effective measure in preventing a nuclear arms race and towards achieving nuclear disarmament. Prohibition constitutes a fundamental step towards the complete, verifiable, and irreversible elimination of nuclear weapons needed for achieving and maintaining a world free of nuclear weapons, and moreover, implementing Article 6 of the NPT. South Africa's commitment to disarmament is also based on our belief that international peace and security cannot be divorced from development. Accordingly, South Africa's policy of disarmament and non-proliferation, which covers all weapons of mass destruction, forms an integral part of our country's commitment to democracy, human rights, sustainable development, social justice, and environmental protection, which is reflected in our humanitarian approach in the earlier to disarmament. It is, in our view, unacceptable that decades after the use or testing of nuclear weapons, many affected communities still await assistance and environmental remediation. The states parties to the TPNW remain committed to addressing the harms of nuclear weapons use and testing, including through the TPNW's positive obligations in Article 6 and 7. In this regard, the TPNW states parties and signatory states are doing their part by advancing the implementation of positive obligations of the TPNW, including through the development of mechanisms to facilitate victim assistance and environmental remediation. South Africa would continue applying its unique history and international standing in the nuclear arena, as well as the country's commitment to the use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes only, to advance nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation within the TPNW, the NPT, and the broader disarmament and non-proliferation architecture. In closing, it is hoped that through this seminar series and other similar events, young people and the next generation of leaders are provided the tools, experience, and the opportunity to share new perspectives and innovative ideas to strengthen nuclear disarmament efforts and pursue our shared goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. With those few words, I want to congratulate you again for this series of lectures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mabhongo. Thank you again for taking the time to meet with us today, and thank you for those grounding and important contributions to the outset of the global classroom today. I especially want to thank you for raising the role of non-nuclear armed states and highlighting the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I know that many of us look forward to seeing you later this year in New York City for that review conference. So thank you again for joining us, sending all the best to Pretoria and all of the great work that you and your colleagues in South Africa are doing in this moment. I'm going to pass the floor now to Susie Snyder, who is the Director of Programs at the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize winner. Susie is based in the Netherlands, but I believe she's calling in from Italy. So,
thank you very much,
Susie,
Molly.
please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. It's very good to hear those words. I think it was a good way to start things off today. So I am here in Italy, as a matter of fact, we're one of ICANN's partners. It's the Italian, it's a campaign that was started by the Italian Sokogakai, a campaign called Senza Atomica, and they're launching an exhibition today in Turin. And it's an exhibition designed to educate people about the horrors of nuclear weapons and the solutions that exist in the world to make sure that these weapons are never used again. And so it's quite fitting to be here today calling in from this place to do so. But if you see people moving around behind me, that's what they're doing. They're getting ready for tonight's gala opening of the exhibition. We're living in a time right now, and I think that's maybe why many of you joined this series. And my sincere congratulations to IPPNW for putting together this important global classroom, because we're living in a time where there is a devastating effort to make nuclear weapons seem normal, to make them seem like they're just another part of the arsenal that is used and subscribed to by governments for security. There's an effort to legitimize nuclear weapons, and we see it most particularly, I see it every day living in Europe, but it's happening all over the world. And this effort to make nuclear weapons seem like they are okay is something that we and our colleagues, around the world are working to make sure does not happen, because nuclear weapons are not normal. They're not just another bomb, right? And that's why I think we need to look at the ways that we deal with the problem of nuclear weapons through perhaps 3 different steps. And so the first one of these is the education and the importance of disarmament education. Not only is it imperative that we help people understand the consequences of the use of nuclear weapons, but we also have to understand the consequences and the impacts of the testing and development of those weapons, to understand the choices that are made when a government decides to choose nuclear weapons instead of choosing, for example, to invest in its own local security and its own local infrastructure. In 2024, governments spent more than $100 billion on nuclear arsenals, 9 governments. That was the collective spending. And that was a specific choice they made to take that money away from other critical areas that would have provided more stability, security, and sustainability for their citizens. So disarmament education is really key, that we understand both the risks of using nuclear weapons and the devastating consequences of those risks, but also the reality of ongoing subscription to nuclear deterrence programs, because that just makes the effort for disarmament much more difficult. And it's something that we can and should change. And as we take these steps towards eliminating nuclear weapons from the world, I think we have to first understand the problem, and that's where disarmament education comes in. But second, we have to understand some of the legal and ethical and moral underpinnings of our action. And so I want to focus on the law for just a moment. The ambassador mentioned both the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And these are two elements in the global nuclear disarmament and nuclear abolition architecture. But I think it's also important for us to think about other components of that as we kind of bring this conversation forward, because we have regional nuclear weapon free zones that are covering much of the Earth. We also have a comprehensive test ban treaty, which is designed, although the treaty itself is not enforced, it has established a taboo against nuclear testing, something that we must strive to uphold, and is reinforced by the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which comprehensively outlaws all things to do with nuclear weapons, including their testing. All of these instruments are complementary. And so law, I think, is a second thing when we think about a three-step approach towards the elimination of nuclear weapons. So it's education, it's the law, but the third thing, and perhaps the most important thing, is us. And it's ordinary people who choose to make a difference. And I say ordinary people because at the end of the day, and I'm sitting here right behind an exhibition that is ordinary people who chose to do something extraordinary and changed the world in so doing. And that could be any single one of us. ICAN is a global campaign comprised of more than 730 partners in 113 countries. And it's a campaign of people who think that nuclear weapons are a problem and are willing and eager to do something about it. Now, within this campaign, one of the great things is that everyone matters. Every action matters. So I'm here at the launch of a brilliant exhibition to inform people about the impacts of nuclear weapons, about the advocacy that established the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and encourages them to take action themselves. And what we're seeing is more than 1,000 people in the region have signed up to volunteer to be part of this exhibition, to support it in some way. Hundreds of these people have trained so they can walk through and be curators and help walk young people through the exhibition on a day-to-day basis. And it will be running here for the next few months. And that is something that ordinary people decided to do. Ordinary people took on the effort to bring it together, and they worked together with one another. Nothing in the room where I sit today was developed by a single individual. Just as nothing, when we achieve the abolition of nuclear weapons and there are no more nuclear weapons, we will not be able to point to a single action and say, oh, that was the moment. What we will see instead is a collection and a culmination of activities that have taken place because ordinary people made a decision that nuclear weapons were not normal. They were not okay. And they went through the law. And they built up more information and shared that information with others to reach a world where nuclear weapons no longer exist. Today, it is scary when we think about nuclear weapons. I am more worried about the issue than I have ever been. But that is also an opportunity for action. It's an opportunity to educate others. It's an opportunity to show them there's a path through law to eliminate nuclear weapons for good. And it's an opportunity for us to work with one another and make that happen. So I'm so honored to have been asked to be part of this global classroom. And I'm so excited for all of you who are taking this journey together, and really grateful for the work that you have already done and the work that you will continue to do, because we can make this happen. and we can do it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Susie. That was a beautiful, I think this is the right word, beautiful tribute to what we are able to do together when we come together. So thank you for joining us on the margins of that exhibition, and thank you for being a part of this space in such a wonderful and impactful way. One of the elements of this classroom, which we'll talk about in the second half of today's meeting, is not just the educational component, but we will have sessions where we learn about what we could do with what we're learning, which, you know, those two pieces must go hand in hand together. Because like you said, right now is a terrifying moment to be aware of what's going on around the world, and we need to have action with that education, because that's what brings hope, and that's what brings progress. So thank you again, Susie. We will let you go to go enjoy the exhibition and enjoy your time with Senza Atomica and other Italian campaigners today. And if you're in Italy, anybody here, please go and check out the exhibition. Okay, thank you, Susie. I am now going to share a video from Dr. Ruth Mitchell, who is the board chair of IPPNW based in Sydney, Australia. She is also a neurosurgeon, so she was quite busy and is unable to join us live today. This will be the last speaker in today's meeting. After we hear from Ruth, I will give an overview of the program and what you all can expect in the next 10 months, and then we'll have a poll and we'll be able to hear a bit from you. So give me 1 second to share my screen. Hope that you can see this. Sorry. Okay.
Molly, it seems you're not sharing audio.
Sorry.
It seems
Hold
you're
on.
not sharing audio, I think. Just a moment.
Sorry, hold on 1 second. Oh, I see. Okay. Let me know if this works, please.
Students from all over the world, as well as other professionals and concerned citizens who really Hello, I'm Dr. Ruth Mitchell. I'm the chair of the board of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, and I'm also a neurosurgeon. I work and live in Sydney in Australia, and I love looking after kids and adults who have problems with their brains and their spines. I think I have the best job in the world, but I also think I have the best, I don't know, what would you call it, hobby? Which is working with some of the best people I know to get rid of nuclear weapons. And it's a real privilege to be able to join you and to speak to you as part of this IPPNW Global Classroom. So many, many thanks to Soka Gakkai International, who have made this possible through their grant, and also to Molly McGinty, the amazing Molly, who has put this all together and has really curated what I think is going to be an incredibly valuable tool and resource for all of us as we think about what are the things we need to know to be empowered to do the work together of nuclear abolition. So what I want to share with you today is a little bit about why it's so important to have health professionals involved in this work, and also why is disarmament education so important. And I have to go back to my own sort of roots in this movement, and the first time I went to a meeting of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. It was my first year of medical school, and the meeting was in Beijing, in China. And myself and a classmate arrived. We traveled all the way from Adelaide in South Australia to Beijing and arrived at the health campus where the Congress was being held. It was at that meeting in Beijing that I first met doctors and medical students from all over the world, as well as other professionals and concerned citizens who really understood that all the other efforts we go to make the world a better place, whether it's as health professionals to save lives and heal people and alleviate human suffering, are kind of irrelevant if we're in a world that's bristling with nuclear weapons. So it was at that meeting that I started to understand nuclear weapons as a public health issue primarily, and to understand that the solution for this scourge of these worst weapons of mass destruction is healthy public policy, which is, the health promotion framework we need to use for everything. And I'm delighted that over the 22 years that I've been involved, I've been a part of seeing some real big moves and some big changes in how we think about nuclear weapons internationally. Obviously, the biggest change we've seen is we now have a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons, which has come into law. It's international law. And that came about because of disarmament education and a number of concerned citizens becoming activated, many of them health professionals, through the Medical Association for the Prevention of War in Australia, which is IPPNW's Australian affiliate, and coming together to create something called ICAN, which is the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And having been there right at the beginning of that journey, I can see how a few people who decided to inform themselves and decided to work with others were able to bring together, a coalition, a campaign that reaches all the way around the world. And I think that when we want to work in disarmament spaces, we really need to have the basics right. So it's this, global classroom, I think, is meant to be empowering for you, not intimidating. There's a lot of information, there's a lot to learn, but I'm hoping that you will find with all of the different presentations and discussions that you become a part of that this is actually super empowering information. And you don't need to know very much at the beginning to understand why nuclear weapons are a problem. And each single person who comes to this work will find their own reasons for why they want to be involved and why this is important. For me, the reason why health professionals and why me as a surgeon, why I need to be involved in this work is because I can work all day to take, for example, a brain tumor out of the posterior fossa, the back part of the brain of a young child, and hand them back to their parents for cuddles, and watch them recover from that tumor, having taken the whole thing out, having done a great job. But I still go home with the knowledge that that child lying in the ICU, recovering from their operation, is still at imminent danger of dying in a sudden nuclear war. And so all of the threats to life that we fight for, we fight against as doctors, and all of the work of healing that I try to do with the team that I have around me, is really undermined and made a mockery of, whilst we still have these worst weapons of mass destruction, with 13,000 of them in the world still, and many thousands of those on hair trigger alert. And particularly at a time like this, when the nuclear risks are escalating and the brinksmanship and the threats of getting new weapons is happening all around the world, we have to be even more aware and informed so that we can really speak to that prescription for survival, which is nuclear weapons abolition. So really, I'm wishing you good fortune and a great deal of enjoyment and stimulating thought as you go along this journey with the global classroom. And I'm giving you my best wishes as you become more informed and more empowered to join us in this important work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ruth Mitchell, for joining us today from afar and in the midst of what I know was a very hectic clinical week. Ruth is one of the champions of IPPNW and ICAN, and who I'm certain will join us in a future classroom session. And apologies for the audio mess up in the beginning. I often joke that we're 6 years past the start of COVID and I still have trouble screen sharing and doing basic things on Zoom. So thanks for dealing with that. We just heard from 3 incredible speakers from 3 different continents that all really had the same thread in what they said, that disarmament education is essential for making change. It's the foundation of everything that we have to do, that nuclear weapons pose an acute threat to human safety, safety and health, and that each of us, meaning everybody in this room and everybody that might be listening to this recording, have the opportunity to make change. And that doesn't mean that we do it by ourselves, and that doesn't mean that we have to become ambassadors in our respective countries, although I'm sure people in this room will do that someday. But it means that we have to work together, and that collective action will lead to progress. So with that said, I'm going to attempt to screen share again. Give me one moment. And I'm going to go through a really quick PowerPoint slideshow of what you all can expect from the global classroom. So give me one second. Okay, can you see my screen? Great, okay. So we are now finally going to get into the why are you all here today and what can you expect over the next 10 months. So each session of this global classroom will offer structured, accessible, and high-quality educational programming to strengthen global understanding of 1, the humanitarian impacts of nuclear weapons, 2, the current risks posed by nuclear weapons, and 3, the actions individuals can take to advance the abolition of nuclear weapons. The classroom sessions will take place every 3 to 5 weeks, so about once a month we'll gather together to learn about these 3 core issue areas. The sessions will take place at varying times because, like we've seen today, we have many, many time zones to cover. Nuclear weapons impact every single person on this planet, and we want to make this program accessible to as many of us as possible. That means that some sessions might be in the middle of the night for you, some might be during your workday, and some might be when you're out on the town. But all of the sessions will be recorded and will be accessible and sent to our listserv immediately following, or in the days following the session, I should say. They'll also be posted online. We want this information to be accessible to a wide variety of people, including those that are not part of this very special cohort of participants today. Our session structures. So today is a bit of an anomaly. Future sessions will not look like today's. Going forward, each will be about an hour and a half. We'll have about 30 minutes of a presentation by an area expert, about 30 minutes for Q&A and discussion, and then about 30 minutes at the end for an advocacy highlight. So we'll look at a number of issues to answer the question of what will you do with the information learned today? Like Ruth said, and Susie said, and Ambassador Mabhongo said, we don't just need education, we need education coupled with action. If you have all of the education in the world and nothing to do with it, that doesn't really serve our community very well. So we want to make sure that you have the tools to take action when you leave every single session. The topics that are covered are listed on our website, but just so that you are aware, we'll start with a nuclear weapons 101, again, acknowledging that many of us come with different foundational knowledge levels, and we want to make sure that we're all kind of speaking the same language as it is. We'll give an overview of the indiscriminate humanitarian harm that nuclear weapons bring, which Dr. Mitchell gave an overview of. Relevant treaties, including the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, 2 of which were mentioned today. Medical response or lack thereof, radiation impacts, psychological impacts, looking back at Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the lasting legacy there. Nuclear winter and nuclear famine, deterrence, nuclear testing, and much, much more. This is in the order that they will be covered, and that's for a number of reasons. It's not in order of importance. So really excited to cover all of this and more with you. And then this is kind of the draft overview of what kind of advocacy you can expect to learn about. We'll have campaigners from around the world, people like Susie, people like Ruth come in to give an overview of how to effectively engage decision makers, utilize social media, publish op-eds, prepare presentations, conduct research, engage medical communities, pass ICAN cities appeals, promote divestment at your universities or banks, and much, much more. So we're going to look at this issue from both a global international lens and bring it much much more concentrated to your local, as close as your university or as close as where you bank. We want to make this accessible and interesting to you all. I'm sure that some people here are more interested in the international element of it, and others want to see what can I do in my community today. So we will have a few opportunities for folks that complete all 10 sessions of this global classroom. I'm sure you saw this when you registered and when you saw the ad online, but just so, again, we're all speaking the same language as it is, there's kind of 4 key components here. One, that you'll learn directly from leading experts in the global nuclear disarmament movement, academia, the health sector, and the United Nations. We've seen a start of that today. I hope that you feel energized and encouraged by the presentations you heard. Everybody will earn an official certificate of completion that can boost your CV if that's something that you're looking for. We are going to offer slots at an IPPNW side event on the margins of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons Review Conference that's taking place later this year for people that complete this program to engage in. Much more information on that will follow soon. We're seeking funding for cohort participants to have the opportunity to apply for micro grants to complete local or national advocacy. We know that these things require that these actions require funding and require bandwidth. So we're hoping to make that possible for many of you. And kind of what I think is most important is that you'll come out of this 10-session period well-equipped to take action. That includes speaking to decision makers, publishing op-eds, organizing street actions to pull us back from the brink of nuclear war. Like we heard in all of the presentations today, and like many of you know, it's regular, everyday people that make change, not just the people at the highest levels. So what's next? In the immediate, our first official module, So Nuclear Weapons, which is a kind of a Nuclear Weapons 101, is taking place on Monday, March 2nd at 8 p.m. GMT. That is 7 hours later than today's meeting started. We'll have speakers. We'll have 2 speakers, one from from the mission of Kyrgyzstan at the United Nations in New York City, and somebody from the Federation of American Scientists. And the expected outcomes of that session is, again, to learn foundational information about today's nuclear arsenals. So that includes an overview of who are the nuclear armed states, what are the stockpiles, what are the types of weapons and delivery systems that we need to know about, and what makes nuclear weapons uniquely destructive. So I'm really excited for that session. 2 incredible speakers that we'll have, and really good time for discussion. This will be sent over email, so no need to write everything down now. Going forward, I hope the goal is to send out save the dates for each of the sessions at least a month beforehand. I know that everybody's schedules fill up very, very quickly, so I want to be conscious of that. Thank you so much again for participating in today's session, for joining the Global Classroom. I'm really, really excited to get to know many of you over the next 10 months. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Thank you to Ambassador Mabhongo, Susie, and Ruth for speaking to our campaign and speaking to the importance of disarmament education and the contributions of each of you going forward. As we heard today, the risk of nuclear war has never been higher. We're seeing international law and basic norms crumble in front of us, and it often feels like we don't have control over what's coming next. But I genuinely believe that collective action, beginning with sound evidence-based education, will lead to the change that we need to see. So thank you so much for being part of that. Thank you again for joining today on this Friday. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all on Monday, March 2nd. I will send this recording to you all along with the link and the save the date for our March 2nd meeting. Take care this weekend, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Bye, y'all.